So how can we make sure that the balance recorded is at the correct amount? So now guys, this is where IFRS and knowing your requirements are so important, because you are testing, have they complied with the accounting treatment to make sure the amount is correct. So we're going to look at the IFRS requirements next week. So don't panic if you're starting to stress about, oh, I don't really know the requirements for PPE, if it's the revaluation or cost model, or so on. But we do still need to look at valuation here. The only thing I do want you to really consider is specifically with your assets, because guys, liabilities, they need to be recorded at the value that the liability is due, whereas an asset needs to be recorded at the fair amount for that asset, which may not be the amount that it was purchased for. So with assets, you always are going to have a contra asset, which I've said over here, or a negative asset, which reduces it to a prudent amount. So you're going to have your allowance for credit losses, for debtors. You're going to have depreciation for assets and amortization. You're going to have revaluations. You're going to have obsolete stock adjustments and adjustments to NRV. You are going to have all of these that reduce the assets to a prudent amount, and these are all requirements for valuation. They're your IFRS requirements. IFRS tells you this. So, I've broken it up into two considerations. And guys, only the second consideration, this contra assets, is only relevant to assets. So if you're doing valuation for liability, this is ignored. So that's why when we're doing valuation, it's often that it is an asset, because there's lots to do with valuation. However, the first consideration, the gross amount, is applicable to assets, liabilities, and equity. Any balance will have a gross amount, and that needs to be tested. So I've said the first thing we do for the gross amount is we have to do a reconciliation, where we have to agree the balance in the general ledger to the sub-ledger. Because the sub-ledger's got all the details, so we must go and make sure that the balance in the total of the sub-ledger agrees to the balance in the GL, and follow up on any reconciling items. Now I've done a total recon. Now I need to go and get a little bit more evidence. So if there's a physical item, I can go and do a stock count or a PPE count or machine count, whatever the physical item is, to get my quantity, and I can therefore go and agree the quantity in the sub-ledger to the count sheet. Okay, whatever they use to count and record, I can get that evidence for the physical quantity. The cost, then, I just need to get the invoice or the contract. Now remember guys, when you are doing valuation, you have those additions and those disposals. And these two, you would have already audited using your class of transaction, or if you haven't, you must go and audit those using your class of transaction assertions in terms of the accuracy. So when I'm looking at this cost here, it should have been addressed when I audit the transactions, because your opening cost, you would have agreed to your closing cost in the prior year, and it would just be the changes this year. Okay, so cost would have been audited or should be audited when you look at your transactions. Quantity, you can go and do your counts, and then the only adjustment to that cost would be your contra asset, that negative. Depreciation, revaluation, fair value adjustments, and so on. And then all I've said here, I'm not going to write it all out again, is refer to your ISA 540 estimate procedures. So you have to add them, you must write them down in a test. I'm just not putting them down here. So for valuation, you first do your gross amount, do that reconciliation. There's a physical item, I can go and count it. If we don't have a physical item, then I can also go and audit the transactions, and then audit my negative assets. I could also get an external confirmation, which could give me a little bit of evidence over valuation. My procedures for the estimate, what is the accounting policy? So inquire about that. Test its consistency by comparing it to the prior year, and its reasonability by comparing it to the market. Recalculate. Test the components that make up that calculation. So think about it. If it's depreciation, there's a useful life. There is a potential residual. Go and test those to make sure they're reasonable. If it's allowance for credit losses, it's generally based on the aging of your data. So go and test the age analysis. Select a sample from each age group, trace it to an invoice, make sure they're aged correctly. If it is NRV, to lower of cost or neutralizable value, go and test the neutralizable value, go and agree the selling price to an invoice and the cost to sell to an invoice to get that NRV amount. Rights and obligations, we have to make sure that they have the right to all the assets, and that for all obligations they have recorded a liability. Okay, so those are our risks here. For me, there's no real test here for my obligations because it's the same way as I would test for completeness. Make sure that they've recorded all liabilities for which they have an obligation. So our focus is going to be on rights. And what is the biggest risk? The risk is that they have ceded their rights to an asset. Why would they cede their rights, guys? And I'm going to give you some other examples of words. Cession of rights, you might have heard. Encumbered. Or security. All different ways in which they can say it. So what does it mean? It means they have the asset. It exists. When I test for existence, I can see it. But my issue is that they give those rights away. And why would they give those rights away? If they needed a loan. So they need money. The lender will only give it to them provided they give some sort of security. And so they give their rights to an asset away in the event that they default on the terms of that loan. So how can we test rights? Obviously, I've just said to you, you can look at the document to see it's in the name of the entity, and just be specific, guys. If you're looking at vehicle, you want to make sure it's the license. If it's a property, you want to make sure that they've got title deeds. Anything else, you're looking at an invoice or a contract. But the best way to test once we've done that is to make sure they haven't given away their rights for a loan. So I'll go and inspect loan contracts, bank confirmation, and minutes of directors' meetings for any indication that they've given away their rights for a loan. So it would be a paragraph in a loan contract. In the bank confirmation, if they have loans from the bank, they would include that. Minutes of directors' meeting, that's where they would make the decision. Okay, and what is important about this? It must be disclosed so that the users are aware of that. And so my next assertion, presentation and disclosure, when I inspect that the balance has been presented and disclosed correctly in the financials, if they've given away the rights, you want to see that in the PPE note or the debtor's note, wherever and whatever assets have lost the rights. And that's it, guys. Some examples of substantive procedures for your assertions. Let's just go back to the slides for some exam technique. So guys, basically all I want to do here is a summary of how you guys should approach a substantive procedure question so that you've got a structure to follow to maximize your marks. So the first question you need to ask yourself when you see you're doing substantive procedures is, what are you auditing? Are you auditing a transaction, an individual? So it would be one transaction. Or are you auditing a class of transactions? So now it's not one, it's a group of transactions, whether it be additions to PPE or disposals of an asset, or something that's sitting in your statement of comprehensive income, repairs and maintenance, sales, purchases? Or are you auditing an account balance, so something sitting in your statement of financial position? But remember, I have also made it very clear that the movement in your account balance could be transactional, so that requires class of transaction assertions. Once you know what you're auditing, you then go and put down your general procedures. So if you are auditing a class of transaction or account balance, you will have to do the closing amount to the financials. But if you are only auditing an account balance, you will then also have to do the opening balance. Okay, there's no opening amount for a class of transaction. It starts fresh every year. Then, class of transaction or account balance, because they're multiple, you then need to go and cast that so that you can see that it adds up and totals correctly. For whichever you do, you must consider the effectiveness of the controls. One mark to just say, consider the effectiveness of the controls and the impact on the substantive procedures. It's a general mark you will always get. Then, where once again you've got multiple, you need to go and inspect for any unusual items in that multiple. So the list or the journal or the general ledger. For whichever you are auditing, you must always get a management rep letter. And then you've got to do your analytical procedures once again for whatever, whether it's a transaction, a class of transaction, or account balance. You must do analytical procedures. And then just to be aware, if it's something complex, if you can get an expert, put down getting the expert, but then assess the expert. So, is the expert competent? Is the expert independent? Look at the work done. And if internal audit is available for whichever transaction, class of transaction, or account balance, use internal audit's work. But again, you're relying on somebody else, so you've got to make sure you can rely on that person. Then when it comes to having done your general procedures, you now need to get into the detail of that transaction, that class of transaction or account balance. So ask yourself, what are the IFRS requirements? What does accounting say about how you should go about recording this in terms of initial recognition, in terms of subsequent measurement, in terms of presentation and disclosure? Once I'm aware of what accounting says, I then go and ask myself, but what are the risks here? Where are the biggest risks? Because that's where I want to focus. And then I go and I link the risks to an assertion because I understand my assertions. So I can then go and say, if that was the risk, that's the assertion. And then I have some examples of procedures for those assertions because we've just done those. And where possible, I will go into the standards to help me with additional procedures. Okay, so this is what you're thinking when you are answering substantive procedures instead of just looking at it and hitting a blank. These are questions you ask yourself. You've now got some information, examples of how to test different assertions. You've got the standards for specific procedures as well as specific balances that require additional work. And so I can start to put down points to maximize marks. Okay. I want to do a class example now, guys, so please refer to the class example document. And guys, I'm going to give you three minutes reading time, although you would get 6 in a test based on the number of marks, but we want to try and reduce the time here. 3 minutes reading time, and I'm going to give you, in terms of your writing time, 20 minutes. Okay, essentially if this were a test or exam, you would have the full 6 and the full 30. So if you have that time, then actually take that to really see where you're at. But if you are limited in terms of time, it has been a long lecture, just stick to the reduced amount and then come back to the recording.